Jangnama is an eyewitness account of Ahmed Shah's invasion of 1764, of which our knowledge is extremely poor otherwise. The eyewitness was Nur Muhammad. We present a liberal translation of Qazi Nur Muhammad's narration which elucidates the high conduct of Sikhs, their mode of fighting, their faith, and courage. Do not call these Sikh dogs, because they are lions and are courageous like lions in the battlefield. How can a hero, who roars like a lion, be called a dog? Moreover, like lions they spread terror in the field of battle. If you wish to learn the art of war, come face to face with them in the battlefield. They will demonstrate it to you in such a way, that one and all will shower praise on them. If you wish to learn the science of war, O swordsmen, learn from them. They advance at the enemy boldly and come back safely after action. Understand, Singh is their title, a form of address for them. It is not justice to call them dogs. If you do not know the Hindustani language, then understand that the word Singh means a lion. Truly, they are lions in battle, and at times of peace, they surpass Hartim in generosity. When they take the Indian sword in their hands, they traverse the country from Hind to Sindh. None can stand against them in battle, howsoever strong he may be. When they handle the spear, they shatter the ranks of the enemy. When they raise the heads of their spears towards the sky, they would pierce even through the Caucasus. When they adjust the strings of the bows, place in them the enemy-killing arrows and pull the strings to their ears, the body of the enemy begins to shiver with fear. When their battle axes fall upon the armor of their opponents, their armor becomes their coffin. The body of every one of them is like a piece of rock, and in physical grandeur every one of them is more than 50 men. It is said that Bahram Ghor killed wild asses and lions. But if he were to come face to face with them, even he would bow before them. Besides usual arms, they take their guns in hand and come into the field of action, jumping and roaring like lions, and raise slogans. They tear asunder the chests of many and shed blood of several of their enemy in the dust. You say that the musket is a weapon of ancient times. It appears to be a creation of these dogs rather than Socrates. Who else than these dogs can be adept in the use of muskets? They do not bother even if there are innumerable muskets. To the right and the left, in front, and towards the back, they go on operating hundreds of muskets angrily and regularly. If you do not believe in what I say, you may inquire of the brave swordsmen who would tell you more than myself, and would praise them for their fighting. This bears witness to my statement that they faced 30,000 heroes in the battlefield. If their armies take to flight, it is a war tactic of theirs. They resort to this deception, in order to make the angry army grow bold and run in their pursuit. When they find them separated from the main body and away from help and reinforcement, they at once turn back and fight more ferociously. They set fire even to water. Did you not see that while fighting the Pathans, they took to flight, which was deceptive? O valiant fighter, do justice to their act of war. One of their armies invaded Multan and put the city to plunder and devastation, and killed many of its inhabitants, and carried away an immense booty. I am not sufficiently strong in mind to express what the dogs did there. But as God willed it, each of us has to submit to his will. Besides their fighting, listen to one more thing in which they excel all other warriors. They never kill a coward who is running away from the battlefield. They do not rob a woman of her wealth or ornaments, whether she is rich or a servant. There is no adultery among these dogs, nor are they mischievous people. A woman, whether young or old, they call a buri. The word buri means in Indian language, an old lady. There is no thief amongst these dogs, nor is there amongst them any mean people. They do not keep company with adulterers and house thieves, though all their acts may not be commendable. If you are not acquainted with their religion, I tell you that the Sikhs are the disciples of the Guru. That glorious Guru lived at Chakamritsar. The ways and manners of these people were laid down by Nanak, who showed these Sikhs a separate path. He was succeeded by Guru Gobind Singh, from whom they received the title of Singh. They are not part of the Hindus, who have a separate religion of their own. Now that you have familiarized yourself with the behavior of the Sikhs, you may also know something about their country. They have divided the Punjab amongst themselves, and have bestowed it upon every young and old. End of quote. A conflation of militancy with violence in the Sikh tradition, especially after the events of 1984, has led to a widespread misunderstanding of Sikhi in the modern world. It has contributed to the unfortunate Sikhs as terrorists propaganda, and has distorted the theological message of the tradition. My 20 years of ethnographic research among Amritdhari and other Sikhs, leads me to propose that elucidating the razor-thin line between militancy and violence, opens a way forward for studies of comparative religion and violence, for dialogue between Sikhs and non-Sikhs in the Indian post-conflict context, and for a healing dialogue within the Sikh community that has been badly damaged by the Khalistan conflict as well. Recall that the Sikh stance of militancy evolved through the leadership of the 10 gurus who originated and led the community. Violence emerged as a last resort when all other means of maintaining Sikhi had failed. It is a narrow line when viewed ethically, from outside, and particularly from an accusational posture, but it is a key distinction when analyzing Sikh tradition from within, emically. We can find a useful and new angle into Sikh discourse through this little-noticed distinction. Sikhs may find a path to a more peaceful and more unified future, if they come to terms with just who their gurus ask them to be, contemplating not only when the time arrives to remove the sword from its sheath, but also when it may be time to put the sword once again to rest, seeking alternate means of fulfilling the duties of Sikhi. Although the first several gurus did not explicitly teach about violence or non-violence, the martyrdom of the fifth guru, Arjan, was seminal. This led the sixth guru, Har Gobind, to take up the classic icon of double swords, Miri and Piri, denoting worldly power and spiritual truth. By implication, one could only find spiritual truth when worldly sovereignty was assured. And the Sikhs did attempt to ensure the political space for their search for truth by becoming Sant Sipahis or saint soldiers, trained as well in the martial as in the spiritual arts. It was Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru, rider of the Blue Steed, who in 1699 established the Khalsa, which committed 5 Sant Sipahis, known as the Beloved Ones, to live with their heads in their hands, or in complete service and egoless dedication. Long ago, Guru Nanak had described such service as the best way to play the game of love, that was human life. In 1699, the 5 were given 5 articles of faith to keep at all times. Uncut hair bound into a turban, a wooden comb signifying purity, a steel or iron bangle on the right wrist, a martial loincloth used for horsemanship, and, perhaps most important, the kirpan or sword. All were called Singh, lion. The women were called Kaur or princess, and were to live as one family. This lifestyle since has become a goal for all Sikhs, whether or not they adopt the 5 articles, or take on the vows of lifelong dedication. Today, the initiation into the Khalsa through Amrit is a visually stunning, deeply moving ceremony. The applicant, who is of age, in terms of conscience and conscious choice, has usually prepared for months or years for the Amrit. It is an irrevocable change in status that can therefore not be undertaken lightly. Men and women both often wear the 5 articles for some time in preparation, and study the holy book day and night. There being no intercessors in Sikhism, every individual knows the prayers, the readings, the ways to approach the spirit. Walking the path of Guru is seen as an ambition that will demand a life's work, so the Amrit ceremony, overseen by the 5 beloved ones, is held in a spirit of deep humility. The vow to give one's head, to live one's life, for one's community and one's faith, is the moment of martyrdom for a believing Sikh. The physical death is but an incidental, in a Guru-permeated life. This is why Amritdhari Sikhs are said to be fearless. It is not exactly courage in the Western sense that is praised here, it is more akin to the Buddhist notion of living as if already dead, that is, in a state of detachment. That is the Sikh state of grace. The actual use of the kirpan, and, derivatively, other weapons, is governed by specific rules. It is to remain on the body at all times but is to remain sheathed. One may remove it from its sheath only to protect the weak, to correct an injustice, and to defend the faith, and only when all peaceful means have failed. It is not to be used offensively, not even for the sake of one's own family. The level of defense must be when the identity of Sikhi itself is in trouble, that is, when it is existentially under assault. That is why Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala, the charismatic preacher who roused the Sikhs to action in 1984, emphasized the danger that Sikhism could disappear in India, unless Sikhs did something about it. He saw the decline of the faith all around him, but never issued a call for separatism. A separate state would be necessary, he said, only if the Golden Temple itself came under attack. Bhindranwala's urging that Sikhs become Sant Sipahis by way of the Amrit ceremony, was prompted by several grievances. A major one was Article 25 of the Constitution, which for purposes of marriage law, groups Sikhs with Buddhists and, ultimately, Hindus. There were other serious grievances such as the diversion of river waters to other states, agricultural pricing detrimental to Punjab Sikh farmers, and the lack of a separate capital city for Punjab. However, these other grievances received little airtime at the Golden Temple, because Bhindranwala understood well that the faith in danger was the trigger point at which Amritdhari Sikhs would take action. He spent much of his time initiating thousands of young Sikhs into the Khalsa, an activity which some criticized as a waste of political time. But in theological terms, the strategy makes sense. When Indira Gandhi proclaimed a state of national emergency from 1975 to 1977, the base of newly initiated Sikhs was motivated to save the faith. These were the core of the Khalistani activists. They set their revolt in terms of the precondition laid down by Guru Gobind Singh, all peaceful means having failed. In their perception, the move from militancy, that is, protesting against Indira Gandhi's emergency measures for which they were jailed in their thousands, to violence, was fully justified. The political implications of the Panth Granth principle are often overlooked. When Guru Gobind Singh noted, as did the Buddha and the Prophet Muhammad before him, the tendency of human beings to idolize charismatic leaders and form a cult around them, rather than continuing to devote themselves to spirit, he took radical action in announcing that there would be no more human gurus after him. Guru had always been a vaguely defined concept, not exactly both human and divine, but conceived more as a human being, who holds within himself or herself the flame of divinity, which is passed on to the next guru, as a candle lights another candle. Guru Gobind Singh, reflecting the two-in-one approach of Miri Piri, the world and the spirit together, said that the whole of the worldly power he held as guru, would be passed into the Sikh panth or community. His spiritual power, on the other hand, would be passed into the sacred texts, the Granth. Hereafter there would be no human leaders, there would be instead, Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book, and Guru Panth, the community of Sikhs. This doctrine became known as Granth Panth, and is one of the clearest expressions of the religion and politics combined thesis in existence. Few theologians, philosophers, or political theorists outside the tradition have commented on the radical quality of this development, the vesting of Godhead in a book open to anyone to interpret, and, correspondingly, the deeply democratic affirmation that the people, students on the path toward God, hold the ultimate authority over themselves. This reality is the Sikhi in which Sikhs understand themselves to be the primary actors. A Sikh saint soldier is one who lives in the state of grace allowed to those who have already died, through committing themselves heart and soul to God, by becoming Khalsa, and martyring himself with joy in defense of God. The Sikh does not look forward to a further life in heaven, far less at the right hand of God, the Father. Nor does he imagine a heaven in which 70-odd virgins await his arrival. The Sikh's martyrdom is existential, an afterthought to the well-lived life on the Guru's path. As founder of the Khalsa, Guru Gobind Singh also defined the use of force within the Sikh panth. When all peaceful means have failed, he said, then it is justified to take to the hilt of the sword. It is on this point that the internal controversy over the 20th century Sikh separatist movement in Punjab centered. Were the members of the Babar Khalsa, and the Sikhs gathered with Jarnail Singh Bhindranwala in the Golden Temple complex in 1984, terrorists the Indian state had the right to rout out of there, or were they revolutionary Singhs who were standing up for Sikh rights, after more than a decade of peaceful protest and sacrifice in the name of democracy? Certainly there was violence, but what kind of violence? For the years during Indira Gandhi's emergency rule, Sikhs led the civilian protests, courting arrest in the thousands. Did this fulfill Guru Gobind Singh's caveat that all peaceful means had to be tried first, before taking up the hilt of the sword? If so, the militant violence of the Khalistanis in the 1980s, may be seen as religiously valid. The Anandpur Sahib Resolution of 1973, had called for a centrifugal dispersion of power from the centre to the states. This had been supported by many of India's minorities and peripheral states, but was initiated by Sikhs working for the good of the community. The later terrorist label for Sikhs supplanted a considerable respect for the courage of the Sikhs in these early peaceful protests. Likewise, historians agree that Sikhs contributed heavily to the Gandhian project earlier, at the front lines of peaceful protest against the British Empire, another fact easily forgotten once the accusation of terrorism took hold after 1984. There are those, however, Sikh as well as non-Sikh, who believe that the avenues for peaceful protest had not been fully explored, when in the early 1980s, Sikh militancy became Sikh violence, pulling it thus beyond the validation offered by Guru Gobind Singh's maxim. Guru Gobind Singh is said to have attached nuggets of silver to his arrows, so that the families of the enemies he had slain, would have the money to sustain themselves. Bhindranwala, leader of the band of militants at Amritsar in 1984, also carried arrows around with him as a reminder of Guru Gobind Singh. But in discourses over the morality of killing, one notes a distinct failure of imagination to consider the victim, both historically and in the present time. One saw Khalistani fighters evaluated according to their courage, their brilliance, their clever strategies, and so on, with no room for the question of victims. The key humanitarian question was whether the victims were innocent bystanders or combatants. The way of thinking that valorizes the soldier, but ignores his victims is a characteristic of warrior cultures, but not of professional soldiers in a modern war, who must uphold the humanitarian laws of war. This doesn't always happen, of course. Likewise, the Granth/Panth formulation of authority in Sikhism, meant that it was virtually every person for him or herself, in terms of understanding what the sacred texts say about the morality of violence, and the five beloved form of leadership, meant that every small community on the local level had the power to take matters into its own hands. That is, decide its own missions. Khalistani Sikhs expressed pride in these features of their religion and culture, saying they expressed basic democracy in action. In the battlefield setting, however, they meant, practically speaking, chaos. They also meant many innocent deaths. The guerrilla organizations organized themselves according to military ranks, but it would be hard to argue that these had much meaning except as honors for jobs well done. No one knew who was responsible for what. No one had the authority to establish rules over things, such as the treatment of civilians and cross-border smuggling, and, though they upheld the Sikh tradition of fighting and dying with stunning valor, the desire for martyrdom played at odds with the instrumental military goal of living to fight another day. Although the Sikhs had real grievances with the government of India, and a generation of men and women gave themselves over to one more chapter in the rich narrative of Sikhs in revolution, in the end the movement faded away for two reasons. First, the population on which all guerrilla movements depend simply grew weary of violence, death, fear, and the crime that had overwhelmed the military aspects of the moment. Second, the government of India had the power to crack down on Punjab with complete impunity, which it did not only during the Khalistan movement, but even after it had bled away its existence. The core of true Sant Sipahis simply had no resources left. Sikhs in the past had been known for turning defeats into victories. But the fight for Khalistan was different, in large part because their side took all the blame for the violence that overtook Punjab, while the Indian government, despite all manner of human rights reports and other attempts to publicize the atrocities Sikhs suffered in repercussion against Khalistani insurgency, got off scot-free. The Sikh as terrorist icon has spread across the whole world. This picture is out of sync with the Sikh army officer that every Indian knew from childhood as a figure to be trusted and respected. That moment of slippage from military defense to bloody violence is critical to a historical narrative of India, that recognizes the interaction of minorities with the center as the key to civilizational structure. For scholars of Sikhi, it is the key to understanding how militancy became defined as a posture that is now linked to violence. Citizens of India showed themselves willing to tolerate, even applaud, the abrogation of their civil rights in the name of national security, as threats such as Sikh separatism reared their heads. Interestingly, the theological formulation of Guru Granth/Guru Panth continues to be at issue today. In the first decade of the 21st century, there has been an increasing tendency, often unmarked, to cite Guru Granth, and simply not mention the complementary Guru Panth at all. As the Khalistan movement wound down in the 1990s, many Sikhs lamented that all their community needed was a strong leader, a comment entirely contrary to the traditional Sikh notion of leadership by community. So powerful is the traditional notion of the Panth, that it is depicted iconographically by the scene in which the first 5 beloved ones, having received Amrit from Guru Gobind Singh, turned around and initiated him. On bended knee, head humbly bowed, sword on the ground by his side, the Guru sipped from the bowl of nectar proffered by one of the newly sworn Khalsa. This early Panth had the power even to initiate a Guru. Today, however, for some at least, faith in the community has apparently been shattered. In an intriguing attempt to analytically separate the elite leadership of the Khalistan movement, from the broad base of Sikhs who, in the late 20th century, became alienated from the state of India and developed a collective forward identity, Jasdaf Rai distinguishes between the first as a modernist movement for a territorial Sikh state, which failed, and the layer, the body of ordinary Sikhs that has resisted assimilation to any other collectivity, before and after the moment in time, marking the Khalistan movement with its attendant violence. The Sikh layer could never fit into a secular state that demands separation of the socio-political from the spiritual, because for Sikhs they are intertwined. Yet the response to the secular territorial state of India need not be a contrarian Sikh territorial state of Khalistan. Rai's concept of layer allows for a wider, postmodern range of futures for a Sikh Panth, that need not defer to the territorial state model of sovereignty. In the 21st century, when it has been made clear that the path of arms has not led Khalistani Sikhs to victory in their struggle for a sovereign Sikh state, many Sikhs have turned to their holy book to try to figure out when the kirpan is to be appropriately returned to its sheath, even if Guru Gobind Singh's standard of when a turn to violence is justified, had been met. Significantly, the guidance of the book is that Sikhs are only to return to a peaceful path when victory has been achieved. Unfortunately, there is no advice as to when it may be appropriate to resheath the swords, and again attempt a peaceful path to the assertion of rights, or protection of the weak, or the correction of an injustice, the other two grounds for the use of arms. Sikhs had been always expected to win, so the if, then, is not present in the text to offer guidance in the current situation. Facing a modern nation-state with a vast military machinery, Sikh warriors of course could never have won their war through the use of arms. Today groups of young Sikhs all over the world are rethinking what to do next.